My name is Arnstein Brekke, and I work in Bodø kommune with heritage in general and vernacular buildings in special. I'm a member of ICOMOS Wood Committee and leader of the Wood Committee in Norway. I want to talk about, is there something we can learn from the past about from our historical buildings? And then I must say right away that history is something that has happened. It's around us when it comes to like physical heritage and knowledge and so on, but the only thing that exists is the future. The history is away just the minute, the second you say the word. So it's the future we talk about. We're not talking about history as such as but we should look, is there something we can learn? For example, from this building here, which I will say a little bit more later, 400 years old, approximately, in the Arctic climate. Is there something to learn? Maybe. We will have a talk about that. Before I take this, I will also connect to what Ola Fjellheim talked about. What can we learn from the past? I've been working myself a long time with the vicars' houses belong to the Church of Norway in North Norway. And those buildings were done a lot of changes from 1960s onwards when it comes to insulation. They put in new materials in historical buildings. And there was a lot of damage to those buildings. And this kind of recent experience is also very interesting when we look at what do we do for the future. I used to say that if there's a thing in the life you should be conservative about, it's about buildings, not to change them too much, because you can just look at what is the situation, what is the historical situation, what has really been going on. If you open your eyes, it's possible to find some knowledge at least. This Nordland region, Nordland County, is quite long. This is just a part of Norway. So in the middle there is Bodø, and where we are now. And this region, especially in the middle part of Nordland, we have been working with the vernacular buildings, documentation, research, and conservation for a long time. Our communities are both from Norwegian and Samis that are relevant for this are from the traditional fish farmer community. That meant that the men were the fishermen and the women were the farmers. The seasonal fisheries, the men were away half of the year all together in seasons. This culture in this Arctic region, that the survival is depending on planning, discipline, and cooperation. It might be something we can talk about it later. Is it something that is necessary for the future too? In this culture, you can say that the vernacular culture, the architecture, the build architecture, it reflects the culture and the environment. It's in the old culture, it was an obligation to reuse buildings, elements, and materials. I'll show some examples from that. Not only a possibility, it was an obligation. But buildings had served its time, as it says on our dialect. It should partially or fully serve a new time. One example of what we have in this region where we have been working quite a long time, both the National Trust and through Bodø kommune and so on, is the vernacular architecture at the Givar Island, small island with 12 people living. The Eider bird houses, the picture to the left shows all the buildings registered and evaluated with an evaluation on this. The buildings range from the oldest one from built in 1601 up to 20th century. It's a complete fisherman, fish farming society, and still the culture represents both learning and potential for learning and resilience, you might say. So it could be resilience also in the old building culture. Climate and heritage. are somehow melting together, the perspective on climate and heritage, cultural heritage. They are a part of the same challenge. We keep historical buildings. Before we talked about cultural heritage and we talked about sustainability, but not so much about climate. There are, of course, climate shells, even if it's not the right term to use, but they are meant to protect a function towards climate. Through this work we have done is, for example, from the Sami culture in this region, we identified, we had secured, and learned and repaired it. This building also have embedded carbon, not so very much, of course, very small building, but it has embedded knowledge, which I will talk a little bit more about. This is an example of our learning arena, the Sami building, also in this region. It's from soil to soil. It's earthen architecture. Only ecological materials can be inspiration for new architecture, maybe, at least the learning how, what the purpose are and how materials work. We have in this region done a lot of work in dendrochronology, dating climate or dating history through the yearings of the logs in the buildings. The big picture shows all logs, and the small picture show a pine tree, which are high quality, slow grown, high level of core, which is naturally impregnated. But this, we have done that in this region to build knowledge, to try to understand the old building culture. And the survey includes both climate, contributed to climate research, about forest, about typologies, building methods, craft and tools and joints and materials through the last 500 years. We have also important to mention that it's important to keep this building as they have done in the tradition, or to put new layers on as people have, the owners have done up to now. That means, for example, as I also will show example on later, to put a weather wall to protect the building, put panel on a exposed construction. There's a lot of knowledge in that, I believe, and I see that can be adapted. How we can use it in new buildings, and it's a question. It's a question after all, but at least it's an important, in this case, it's also knowledge to how to preserve the buildings, that we understand how they are built and how they are best kept. This is embedded carbon and embedded knowledge, because they contain a lot of knowledge if you put on the right glasses, right eyes. This building, this example, is built in 1631. It rebuilt and moved 5 times. Many people talked about that the slow-grown wood is the reason why these buildings can be so old in Arctic climate. I will say that it might not be the only answer, but here we have an example of that one log grew only 16 centimeters in 456 years, because our documentation of the building shows that. So it's the most slow-grown log that's found from the researchers. So it's extreme quality, of course. But it doesn't help alone, which we will see. This is the second oldest wooden building in Arctic Norway, or North Norway, built in 1528 in Misvær in Bodø kommune. We have documented all the buildings' phases, so we see how buildings have changed, how methods have changed, how people have been thinking about use and reuse. So it still stands quite okay. Last time moved 1895, now just repaired recently. This also about cultural continuation. I can say this log here is very similar to the archaeological findings from Viking time and so on. So they are 500 years later, they were still building the same way. This is the overview over the log hewings, how and what buildings we have found from this from the 16th century and late 15th century, and we have documented them, all the building phases up to the 20th century. It shows actually some interesting things about climate too, because in the 17th century there was what we call the little ice time in the north. And then few buildings were built. Few children were born because of a volcano in Iceland spread its ashes over and it Norway, and it was cold. And we see that also on the yearings. There's suddenly a sudden break, very slow grown. And you see the number of buildings that we have is at least an indication. So there's a lot about all the time we speak about buildings, it's about history of climate. This is the outspread of these log hewings in Misvær, south part of Bodø kommune, and around the fjord. So just an example of that, we documented it, and they are still standing there, these existing buildings. Also about import of spruce, which was not natural here. And the question is, one of the things we talk about in climate is to give to the life cycle of a building and of elements and materials. And what gives a long life? What can we learn from the existing building? Today, the standard of considering buildings now is that a window can last 30 years, even if the window is 100% okay, no wrong in that. A person that makes taxation will say that 30 years, it should be, it gives the worst condition, has the worst condition because of its age. This kind of buildings I showed you is had best condition, maybe because of age. So there's something with our modern thinking about buildings that is interesting to look in perspective of the old buildings. Could be, what gives a long life? Is it duration of timber, of wood? Is it the skill of the carpenters, the builders? Is it the building methods as such? Is it a continuous reuse? Is it the plan and orientation of the buildings? Is it the cultural continuation? We must discuss what that is then, of course. Is it the climate, perhaps? And are there other reasons? Just some examples of questions to put forward. I might not give you so much answer, but at least we should raise some questions here. I will welcome you to Gjønes farmstead, which is a central part of Bodø kommune, by this fjord. The traditional way of building here is that the buildings were mainly, they were built in a row, and they were built with the short side and the corner towards the predominant wind. That's very significant, and there's almost no exception of that, after my opinion. This is my argument. So, and this here example, we see this the red old living house from 1606 originally that has been rebuilt sometimes, and we see this unusually big residential building. It has been developed 3 times, moved once at least, and yeah, developed. So it's an extraordinary long building, but it has the same structure as all buildings have. It's organized, as I said, so that they said from the tradition that they put the short side against the wind, predominant wind, and they turn the building a little. So the corner, the wind breaks at the corner. That is the direct saying from old people I talked to. And that means that you get a perfect pressure over the building's envelope. And when you see that in connection that there's no windows in the short walls, the windows only in the long walls, and the doors always go inwards, don't go outwards. And actually there's also connection to how the chimney and the fireplaces work. The pressure out and inside this building over the pressure is very carefully designed. So in each village, the chimney comes out of a certain side of the ridge. And that has to do with the pressure and the way the buildings are oriented towards the wind. The most important thing is that this gives less need of maintenance, because if you put the building the other way, then you get a lot more pressure, a lot more damages on the building. So this is a very smart way to build. It's not so that we should put all modern buildings up like this, but it might be an inspiration after all to build according to these traditions. It's also so, if you look at the end of this, the nearest end of this yellow building, the residential building, there is actually, inside there is a kind of outhouse built in timber frame that is not for living purposes, only for storage. This is kind of protection or kind of energy zone, which is outside the log construction, and inside the log construction where there could be heated and people lived. And this is very typical for this kind of buildings. You can also see in this storage house, which is gray, that's documented to be built in 1589 or a little later. Then it has been moved in 1873 out from the old village, just 200 meters, and then it was put with a gable against the worst weather. And then they have, as we have done our restoration, we have put a weather wall. And that means that the long walls on that, there's original building from 1589. The only damage is this gray color, which is a fungus that goes into wood, but after a while it protects the wood. At least how we think about it. So there's no danger for this building. The materials are, I just give one small example, is that this paint used on these buildings are from fish liver oil. That typical paint here, from the tradition. A very ecological, friendly paint. Small molecules go into the wood. In the short walls, they use the outskirts of the log. The strongest from very old trees, they chose not the core necessarily, but the first boards they cut, because aesthetically they are not the best, but they are very high quality, and they are used consequently in the gables here. So there's a lot of knowledge in this, and when you put, the interesting thing is that when you think of buildings as protection towards climate and start to look at all the details in that perspective, then you see, and there's another story coming forward. Yeah, as you see from this main building, it's a typical of this. There's a continuity, and it has been changed, moved and changed, and built bigger, but it's done in a traditional way. If that methods of course interesting to discuss, can it be used, this systematically way of building, can it be used for modern buildings? But we can talk about it. But this was one farmstead. When you look at the old village, we go a little south in the fjord, still in Bodø kommune, in Misvær. You look at the map to the right. This is the map before the village was changed, the owner structure and some of the building structure in 1895. But still the same. If you go there now, you will see, like the small picture, that many of the buildings and the farmsteads are still like it was in 1895. And the main thing is that all the buildings are in a row, except for the buildings and towards the predominant wind from the southeast. And the southeast winds are the cold wind by us. Winds coming from falling down from the mountain. In the wintertime, it can be a long time give a lot of a lot of damages too, but mostly getting cold. So they actually have built all the farmsteads so that they open towards the northwest and they are close to the southeast. This is very systematically. You find this in in most of Norway coastline. So, and then you see it in the picture from this building in the middle. The small picture is buildings from who was erected there in 1752 and 1775, still standing there. And it's the courtyard, this courtyard is closed towards the wind. There's no doubt about it. And they even said that the people who live there said it's quite interesting because when the snow falls down, then it's mainly no wind. And then one day or two after, the southeast wind comes and lifts the snow out of the courtyard. So it's actually very, this is real knowledge. This is interesting to mention that since we talked about regulations of building, there were no regulations, law regulations on this building until 1964 in the rural areas of Norway. So this is hard established knowledge through generation after generation. And it's so logic that, and so common that people don't talk about it if you don't are especially interested and really press people to, because they don't talk about these things that are general. So that's typical from this culture. Yeah. From out of this village, there was moved, some of the farmsteads were moved out in 1895, and then they got other ideas. They was inspired by some, for example, from Trondheim, or they made this, or Trøndelag, this region, middle of Norway, where they made this, put the houses, not the residential building, not towards the gables, towards the wind anymore. And then they took some of the old buildings with them, and this gray building was one of them. And before it was standing protected behind bigger buildings. But from 1895 it was put up there, and this, which you see, this building is from 1564. And it was moved in 1895, and it was standing without panel all up to 15 years ago. Then this the long wall was now towards the southwest, and it became more wet and started to rot. And we just put on panel, like this old guy who lived in the neighbor farm said he would do. So we just did that, used small money on that. But the inside is kept, and the knowledge value of this is kept. So we have kept both the carbon and the knowledge of this building. But this is an example of what happens when you come out of the traditional way and you have other impulses. So it's about how we deal with historical buildings too. It's quite some interesting examples there. Just in general, just a small, might say strange example on reuse and lifetime. There's a lot of interesting examples to find around how people have been planning reuse, and the main thing is that they took care of materials without knowing what they should use it for. They kept it for, keep it for a generation in the outhouse before they use it. And today we get rid of all that we don't know what to use. And this is one of the, I think it's an interesting example. Both this building that has been, first it was a grain storage, the farmstead, then it was moved late 19th century to be into a boathouse. And you can see the historical structure, the construction there is quite old type. And then, not so many years ago, this owner, an older guy, used to reuse of materials, he take care of his things. And he put this, he had these things that he got from neighbors some years before, and they just put, because they started to rot along the long wall. So he just put it on to protect. Of course, for people who work with conservation and restoration of buildings, it might not be so delicate, but I think it's one of the nicest examples on how people are thinking very practically how you can reuse materials. It cost almost nothing, and the building is protected for a long time. I actually was with him, so we lifted one of these metal plates there, and it was dry under. This building can stay there a long time. You might say that this prolonging lifetime, and this is, of course, about climate. There's a lot of examples when you put on the right glasses and walk around in this Arctic culture. I have an example of one man who told me that when he was 12 years old, he was helping his grandfather to repair an outhouse. Then the grandfather told him to go into the barn, and on the right side of the door there was a panel board, so and so thick, so and so long, and dark color. And he went to collect it, and because he was repairing the panel of the wall, and when he came back to his grandfather with this, he said that we had put in this board, panel board in the barn, the year that this boy was born, 12 years before. So that is all about planning. And in a harsh climate with little resources, so you just don't need the things you have. You are obligated, or you need to take care of, to have the resources that you need, to collect them and to think in the long term. So how we do it in our very material culture with all the resources we are using, it might be an inspiration for thinking of reuse, maybe. So it's all about, from old times it was about survival. And maybe it's about survival also in the future. So then we have to deal with climate change. That is depending on planning and discipline and cooperation, of course. So just an example from Misvær too, with the rainbow over the haysheds. So thank you.
One question from the audience. We do have time, and we do want to have this discussion to take place. So, some comments, questions, remarks.
Hi, Pasi Aalto from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Where can one find all this knowledge outside of your head? For, let's say, an engaged student from a Norwegian university or a craftsman in training.
It is a challenge, I can say, because we have been so busy taking care of buildings and documenting, so we haven't had time to tell so much about it. So, but it's a very it should be done. Yes, I take that as an inspiration. Yeah, so, but it's important to say that we have. I think that we have just seen a glimpse of knowledge in this. And there is a lot of things we don't know and understand. So, but there are some things to work on, I think so. Yeah.
More comments? What amazed, and I take the chance to comment myself. What amazed me when in Norway is exactly what you do here, is to make so much dendrochronological analysis on vernacular architecture. Actually, I applaud for that, because in Estonia we have done the dendro mostly on the symbolic buildings like churches or manor houses, or a lot of medieval tiling. We do have there the roof construction from medieval period, and that is the eldest construction, wooden construction that we have. And then it's Ruhnu Church from the 17th century on Ruhnu Island. And the time depth of the vernacular architecture here is really amazing. That, and you should keep that. That is just bravo as it comes to the quality of the wood and maintenance. It's really great here. And the second thing is that these traditions, exactly the authenticity of the building that is so much discussed, and actually the central thing to maintain in the historic building or valuable thing is authenticity. And what is authenticity in the case of vernacular architecture? It is not 70% of, from the period of like 1600s. It is actually 17% 70% of the maintenance of the building tradition plus the material throughout the centuries. So what amazes me is that in the case of Sami buildings you have the concrete date when it is like listed and protected, but in the case of Norwegian buildings that you have the logs from 16th century and then from 17th century and mostly from 18th century of rebuilding and building and then onwards. So actually exactly this tradition that comes with the NARA document on authenticity, that is central in the case of UNESCO heritage now, not Venice document, but NARA document, that the tradition itself is so valuable, and it needs to be kept, not 70% of some kind of material, but material plus tradition that makes these pieces so valuable. So,
if I could add myself, not to continue my speech, but inspired by the question from Pasi, it's I think since I put up some questions, maybe I didn't answer them fully, and there's no certain answer. What are the reasons for the long life? But there's I think that all these reasons are there. Also, all the factors. It's not only the slow-grown trees alone, even if of course it has a meaning, but it's the way people have been working with the buildings and taking care of them. So it is an interesting thing. It's also that you have this, that as you saw in the Misvær village, where if you look into the documentation that is done from how it was standing in 1895, you will see that the buildings are protecting each other. And it's very crucial this how, so that's both the structure and it's all details. So the buildings are protected in another way than when you take them out of that environment. So I think that's an interesting factor. And then it's not only one factor alone. I think that you can easily build a building with only slow-grown materials, slow-grown trees and materials, but it will, if you don't take care of the other factors like maintenance with the same materials and all this, it will fall apart too in some time. So, but it's up for discussion, and I think we have done this a long time now, but I think we are just starting to understand it. It's a lot of issues. Yeah. Yes.
Hello, I'm Evan Orson. I'm an architect in Bodø. I find it interesting to see and talk about the planning part of this. Now, Bodø is building a new city. It's going to be big. And as far as I know, it's going to be about the same way of building that they have been doing in Bodø for hundreds of years. Do you know if this is part of the discussion in Bodø, as long as you're working there? I mean, the way to put the buildings, to plan the streets, and to see if you can handle the wind that's so hard and rush in Bodø.
I am not actually. It's not my field of expertise where I'm working with the new architecture. But in general, I don't think this kind of knowledge is taken into account. So I think it's. But it could, as you indicated, I heard that it could be useful. Maybe, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with the maintenance and the life cycles of our buildings. So.
Gisle Jakhilen, I'm architect here in Bodø, member of ICOMOS and International Scientific Committee on Vernacular Architecture. You have raised an interesting point, Arnstein, on the reuse of old materials kept for some future use. And the thinking about future, and we're talking about climate change and aesthetic values of the buildings we have around us. And I gather Sami Rintala probably will touch upon this in his presentation. But I think the discussions in modern architecture today, where you have natural ventilation, what does this system give for inputs on new architecture? I think that's the way of looking on the aesthetic values are connected with your understanding of the building and the feeling what is a good thing, what is scientifically what's felt as a good thing. And again, back to your example, Arnstein, with the use of the metal sheds on this old structure is a surprise. However, this could be of using the system in a, well, slightly more adjusted value, aesthetic value, then it gives a new meaning to the environment. The point, I think, is that the way we look about the buildings, our environment, is part of the understanding of the climate and the way of surviving energy use. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. It's interesting to discuss this. Hopefully also Sami will comment as you. When it comes to this about the orientation of the buildings and so on, it's important thing to say that it's both. I remember I was studying structural engineering in Trondheim a long time ago, and then I started to work with these traditional buildings. And then one night I woke up because I heard from old people about this, and then I did not know this about the orientation of the buildings towards the wind, predominant wind, and then I found out they were even the corners against the wind. That I heard only from 3 people, but it's very, very obvious that it's so. And then I woke up one night and thought about it, and I looked into this the standard for what are the forces that works on building. And it's significant. The answer was there. You just had to open it. Page 4 in the standards, it said that much less pressure on the building when you put it in the traditional way. But we never touched it in the education, And people don't touch it in the practice either. So it's not so that we should build every building like that, but it's some inspiration, perhaps, could be useful. So maybe for this new city in Bodø, as Renovation talked about. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Then thank you. Let me.
Okay.
Last question.
Last question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
yes, hi. My name is Svante Guterstam. I'm an urban planner from Bodø kommune. And I just wanted to comment on your question about the new district that is being planned in Hernes. Whether these principles and knowledge, accumulated knowledge, is introduced in the plans for the new district, and well, it's early to say whether it will be put into practice, but so far what has been made is this parallel study. 3 offices has sort of presented their ideas for a new structure, how it can be arranged, and now there's another opportunity study of how to lay out the new district, and it's Henning Larsen that will continue this this work. And in the earlier stage, they had a very strong concept for microclimate in their program. So where much is about wind and how to orient the buildings and how to place the buildings in relationship to the wind, the heights and the angles of the roofs, and so on. So this is a combination of old and new knowledge. I think it's tools today. They use wind analysis, like data models that where you can sort of model how the wind will flow. But I don't know how much is based on just data and what is sort of the tradition. But yeah, these ideas are within the plans, as far as I understand.
Thank you. Let's have. That was comment, yeah. Let's thank Arnstein and with applause, and go to our next speaker.